Michigan State University's Office of K-12 Outreach, bringing research, innovation, and best practices to educators across Michigan, the United States, and the world.
Once again, I'm Shirley Jackson, an outreach specialist in the Office of K-12 Outreach in the College of Education at Michigan State University. We're back with another installment of our office's focus on International Women's History Month, which we view as an opportunity to celebrate women who've made enormous contributions to the world in general, but especially here in Michigan. So over the next few months, our office will engage in conversations with incredible women who've chosen careers in education. We're impressed, in fact, by the countless ways these super women influence our thinking about education and about their seeming tireless interactions with systems that have the power to create or dismantle our chances at full participation in society. But most importantly, people like today's guests challenge our thinking about what we owe the learners we're privileged to serve, from our tiniest children to young adults who study at our colleges and universities. So I've talked enough, and without further delay, I'll introduce the talented and always impressive Dr. Dorinda Carter-Andrews, professor and chair of teacher education at Michigan State University, who is known internationally as a highly respected expert in the areas of race, culture, and equity. Dr. Carter-Andrews, I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much, Shirley. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thank you. I realize how busy your day is, and I know that you almost never have any downtime. So I welcome you and thank you for agreeing to come and chat with me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I don't want to waste a minute of your time because I know your schedule is all-consuming and that you're relentless in keeping to it. Frankly, it's hard to imagine how you keep up with your long list of obligations and responsibilities. But on the way to trying to prepare for this interview, I've learned some things about you. One is that you're one of the best storytellers there is.
Oh, my goodness.
Seriously. But I hope you'll take a minute to share with us just a little about your journey from youth to chairperson of teacher ed at the oldest land-grant university in the country and one of the largest public universities in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, my journey, began in Decatur, Georgia. I am a Southern girl by nature and one of three children, and, grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, mid to late 70s, early 80s, and early 90s. And at that time in the Atlanta area, schools were still trying majority to majority schooling programs. And while my sisters and I grew up in a suburban community, it was just becoming integrated, quite honestly. And my parents sent me, Shirley, across town to the predominantly white high school because they thought I'd get a better education. So I went to a community elementary school right in my neighborhood and went to middle and high school in a predominantly white community, maybe 10 minutes down the road. And from there, my journey really took a trajectory of learning in predominantly white spaces. Oftentimes, I was one of few Black students, and particularly one of few Black females
I can
in
imagine.
Classes. And I tell folks I am a engineer by training, but an educator by birth. So my undergraduate training is in industrial and systems engineering, but I come from a family of educators.
That is so interesting.
Yes. And
I had no idea. I knew that you had been a math teacher. Right. I knew that.
Yes.
Yeah. So go on. You were about to say.
I taught kindergarten for a year, but I taught high school math for about 3 years. But my mom was a community college instructor. I have aunts and uncles who were educators. My younger sister is a high school math teacher. So it's no surprise, I think, that I've kind of come full circle and blended both the technical and operational side of my brain with the service-oriented side of my brain. Yeah.
It really sounds as if you're quite a well-rounded person. I mean, anyone who can jump from industrial engineering into a kindergarten classroom has to be well-rounded. Well, I have to say that I'm very happy you made the switch. There may be some companies out there who wish you had stayed in the engineering field, but we are the winners by having you decide that you're going to join the field of education.
Yes, thank you.
So, given that you have all of these experiences from the early part of your life to the latter years of your life, and they're not latter yet because you're still quite young, but certainly up until now, I wonder if there were some early experiences that conspired to shape who you are. Who were your champions?
Yeah. Well, I'd say my first champion was my mom, right? I mean, she was my first model of a teacher, what it means to be a teacher and a certain kind of teacher. And she was my first champion, right? An advocate. And that's no slight to my dad, because he certainly, for me, was a champion in his own right. In terms of the way he helped mold and shape me. But Black women have been a strong force in in shaping who I am. An early teacher, third grade teacher, Miss Jackson, I remember her so clearly in the ways in which her moves and just her disposition helped me to understand, a way a Black woman could lead in a classroom, right? And then when I was an undergraduate student, obviously being a young Black woman in a STEM field, I can remember at Georgia Tech, it was Black women who I could go and talk to and say, I need this source of support. Do you have a network for me? And just thinking about them as levers, right? Network levers to help me not only survive, but thrive in various environments.
As I listen to you, it's becoming very clear to me that having those women as role models and mentors has made a difference. And for those of us who sadly grew up at a time when there weren't as many of those, I think they've made all of the difference. And it sounds as if your experiences bear that out.
Yes, definitely.
So you've changed from engineering happily to education. And now you lead the largest, and based on some data I looked at, the #1 teacher ed institution in the country.
Sure.
It's astounding to realize that. But I wonder what makes the work you do so vital to the way our schools are structured.
It's a great question. And Shirley, I'd say, this work is important because we're training future teachers. And we're supporting working teachers, right, through what we do. And that work is so important because teachers mold everyone, right? Most, if not all of us, go through some form of public education or private education. And so you encounter a teacher. So our work here, and I feel blessed to be able to cast some vision, right, and some insight into the work that this department is doing that aligns with the college's mission to just really train that next generation, make sure we have teachers in classrooms that have a justice focus, an equity focus, and that we also work to try to make sure young people have teachers who look like them, who have lived experiences similar to theirs. So it's really an honor. It's a blessing. And I work with amazing faculty. There's nothing that I do on my own. It's the faculty, the staff, the students that make this all work.
So a couple of things that you said really resonate with me. I think out of everything you said, you're pointing out to us that teachers are it. That without good teachers, none of us can do the things that we want to do, and certainly the things that we have to do. But more importantly than that, you point out that teaching is a career. You seem to say that teaching is just a special career. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think that you have some ideas about the kinds of people who should be teaching. Yeah. I heard you point out also, you kind of said a little bit about your special mission to create more equity in schools. But I wonder, first, let's just talk about the kinds of people who should be teachers.
Mm-hmm. You know, oftentimes you'll hear people say, Shirley, well, you've got to have a love for kids. Mm-hmm. And I certainly think that's true. Right. But I think it's a certain kind of love. It's not a missionary love. It's not a savior love, but it's really this radical, empowering, liberating love, right? That says, I'm not just pouring into you, but this is a dialectic relationship that we're engaging in together, where I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, and I'm actually helping you blossom into the person you need to be in life, right? That is a high responsibility.
It is.
And that's why I use this term, a radical love that really is about helping young people be their best selves and not the self we want them to be, right?
So recognizing that they have a direction that they're going to take regardless of us, but that the help we give them can't just be about making sure they have food and clothes. And
that's right.
Sometimes feel that there are people who care about them. We're not saying things aren't important, of course, but you pointed out that we have a higher mission, and that
we do.
Self-actualization, really.
I was just thinking that self-actualization, right? Maslow's hierarchy of need, yes, those basic needs, but how do we really move young people towards self-actualization? Yeah.
Well, I wonder, though, you've told us a little bit about what you've learned about who needs to be a teacher, et cetera. Yes. What have you learned about what it takes to make sure that all children are successful in school? Are there some things? Is there maybe one specific thing other than what you've already talked about that might be critical to student success?
Resources. And I mean that in the broadest sense.
Okay.
Because resources can be human resources, financial resources, social capital resources.
Yeah.
But there are this myriad of resources that young people need to thrive in the educational system as we know it, and then beyond the educational system.
So it sounds as if those resources may have been in short shrift for our kids. You mentioned a number of them, and as you were listing the ones that you mentioned, money comes to the.
Yep.
It always rises to the top of the list. Some people want to poo-poo the need for money, but are we really providing for our students enough money in terms of resources?
Yeah.
All of them are in short supply, but what about money?
And I think my response to your question would be, in some cases, we're not providing enough money. In other cases, we've got plenty of money, and it's where we're allocating it. So how money is distributed and allocated. So I think it's the both and. We've got context matters, the context where a child is learning, and what kinds of financial resources are needed to effectively educate a child in that context. And then how do we distribute those resources in the right programs to support the right policies and to pay the educators?
Wow.
Right.
So that's an equity argument that I hear you making. And, it brings me to, I think about a video I watched of you, and you showed people a picture that was probably the best illustration of what equity really looks like. You didn't need any words to understand it. It was 3 children standing on the same size boxes. One child was a little bitty thing. Another child was a bit taller, and then there was a really tall child. Well, even on the same size box, the little person did not get the view that the taller child obviously got. So the boxes were equal, but it wasn't working for that situation. And you seem to say in another picture where you showed boxes that really gave every child the same view, what equity could look like. How do we ever get there, Dorinda?
I think we can get there, and it's interesting to hear you reference that picture. I know exactly the frames you're talking about, and I've since utilized a different figure, but I think we can get there. It's the will to get there, right? In the United States, we have all the resources we need to educate children properly and equitably. But I'm not convinced that we have the will to do that in every community. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about your champions, your mom being probably the major one. You even talked about the factors that you think have led to your success in your field, and by any measure, I think we'd all have to agree that you're successful. You've risen really to the top of your profession. What do you say to young people who are starting out now and are burdened by some of the inequitable practices that we were talking about? What do we say to them?
This is a good question too, Shirley. And I am often telling young people, first of all, figure out your plan. You always need a plan, and you need a plan A and plan B. And at least for young people that look like me and you, Black and brown youth, recognizing that there will be obstacles, right? There will be. But obstacles can be overcome. Obstacles can be gone around, they can be moved out of the way. And so I try to stress to young people the importance of networks, having an expanded network to help them achieve the goals they have. That you never know who, you don't want to count anyone out of your corner because they can be a resource for you, not in a way of take,
Sure.
but that relationship matters. And if you have a networked community that's rooted in relationship and how people know you and they know your goals and aspirations, it'll help you along the way. The other thing I'll say quickly, I have 3 P's that I often tell young people about: purpose, passion, and perseverance, right? And a lot of young people will say, well, how am I supposed to know what my purpose is? Your network can often speak it back to you, because other people can often see in us what we can't see in ourselves. I never thought I'd be a college professor. That wasn't something that I envisioned for myself, but my graduate school advisor saw that in me, right? So
that's amazing, because you're all of that really says to young people that they needn't think that they have to accomplish everything by themselves. In fact, you're kind of saying you can't do it all by yourself.
You cannot. You need a community.
How do you, if you're a poor kid who comes from a family where there aren't really people that that person can look to and say, well, you know, I've got Uncle Joe who works in the school system. Maybe nobody in that family works in what we might consider something more impressive. How do we help children build those? What do we say to them to help them build those kinds of communities? Where do they start?
That's a good point. I think that's that is incumbent upon the community to wrap their arms around those children. And so school is one place where you find a person, an adult that you can connect with, that you can share your dreams with, that you can share your goals and aspirations, or have that person help you think through what some of those aspirations could be. What are your strengths? What are your talents and gifts? And once you can connect with one person, that can start the connection to other dots, if you will, that in community organizations, other places in your community that can begin to fuel your interests. It only takes one connection. And for young people who are often economically disadvantaged, finding that connection in the school building is a good place to start.
Wow.
If you can't find that person in school, think about the capital you have in your local surrounding and who your go-to people are.
So, you know, it sounds as if you've given us a charge. Our charge is not to lay all of that responsibility on children who are ill-equipped to solve those problems. But as people who've been privileged with the ability to stand in a classroom, let's say, because that is a privilege to me.
It's a privilege.
To stand there, know who your children are, understand what they may be grappling with, and be that first link. That's what I hear you saying.
Yes.
Wow, that's so important. Wow. Well, I could sit and talk to you all day long, but I don't want to hold you up because I know that your schedule is not going to end with this interview. It's hard for me to even imagine you sitting in an easy chair with your feet raised.
Oh, I wish it, Shirley. I wish it for myself.
So as a final question, I just wonder how we extricate ourselves. You've said a little bit about it, and maybe it bears repeating, but how do we get ourselves out of this fix we're in, where education is concerned, and we're facing all of these challenges in this era of teacher shortages and low attendance rates among students? What do we do to try to right this ship?
I think we have to raise the professionalization of the career. There was historically a time where teaching was like highly revered. It was a profession that you aspired to.
Absolutely.
Similar to nursing, right? I mean, these service professions were. And in communities, if you were a teacher, you were of high stature.
Certainly in my community, yes.
That's right. That's right. And I think we really have to work on ways to raise the level of professionalization of the career, paying teachers more, making sure their benefits are, adequate and high quality. Yes. Making sure they're safe in their work environments. Yes. So how do we make the profession attractive again, but also livable, right? I want to do this thing, but I can't live comfortably and have this career. So it's the both and I think both of those pieces help elevate the status of the profession. I think policymakers can help with that, right? And there are certain policies that need to be changed to help with that elevation.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about all of the things that you've said. And it goes without saying that those things need to happen. Mm-hmm. Are we at least starting to see some of that happening?
I think we are. I think not on a large scale nationally, but I think there are pockets where, communities within states or at a state level, we are seeing some radical change. And so I'm hopeful that that will scale up and scale out nationally. It will take time. It won't solve the recruitment and retention challenges or the diversification challenges, but it will help. But I think we're gonna have to be patient but persist in this walk.
Well, Dr. Dorinda Carter-Andrews, as always, you're right on the money. And not only did you come with just a few shallow suggestions for how we might operate, but you've given us practically a road map. I certainly hope that people are listening and that we can all work together to do better by our children. They certainly deserve it.
Yes.
But I feel very lucky that our teachers have you at the helm at Michigan State University.
Oh, thank you so much, Shirley. And it's just been a delight to chat with you this afternoon.
A pleasure for me as well. Please stay well. And hopefully
you too.
We get to talk again soon.
Yes. Take care. Thank you.
Too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.